Welcome to Intangibles, a podcast about the traits, behaviors, and qualities that entrepreneurs can cultivate to help them be successful. I'm your host, Steve BERG. I'm a partner at a New York City-based venture capital fund called Political Ventures. Season 4 is brought to you by Denton's Venture Technology Group at dentonsventurebeyond.com. Operating as a boutique within the world's largest law firm, the Venture Technology Group runs with hard-charging tech entrepreneurs to drive growth through strategic business, finance, and legal advice from Silicon Valley and New York to London, Berlin, Hong Kong, and beyond. Learn more at dentonsventurebeyond.com. Also, please find Intangibles on the web at www.intangiblespodcast.com. Will we, as a society, become the pets of a robot overlord? Sounds like an absolutely crazy question, right? However, I'd be willing to bet there are some people listening that have absolutely, with no hint of absurdity, considered this question. After all, anyone remotely involved with technology has heard about artificial intelligence. On one hand, we have the utopian view of noted futurist Ray Kurzweil, who's quoted as saying, "Artificial intelligence will reach human levels by around 2029. Follow that out further, say 2045, we will have multiplied the intelligence, the human biological machine intelligence of our civilization by 1 billion-fold." On the other hand, we have a decidedly less utopian view of Elon Musk, who's quoted as saying, "I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight, maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon." Elon appears a tiny bit more cautious. And of course, each of us has to wonder, how will this affect me, and how will this affect future generations of my family? KaiFu Lee is a venture capitalist, technology executive, writer, and artificial intelligence expert. He is currently based in Beijing. Dr. Lee developed the world's first speaker-independent continuous speech recognition system as his Ph.D. thesis at Carnegie Mellon. He later worked as an executive, first at Apple, then SGI, Microsoft, and Google. One of the most prominent figures in the Chinese internet sector, he was the founding director of Microsoft Research Asia, serving from 1998 to 2000, and president of Google China, serving from July 2005 through September 2009. He is one of the most followed microbloggers in China, where he has over 50 million followers. In 2018, he authored the book AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. If I'm successful today, he's going to not only scare the heck out of me, but simultaneously calm me down by explaining the virtues of being human in the age of artificial intelligence. Welcome, Dr. Lee. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, before we set off any alarm bells, which I'm sure we're going to probably do that anyway, but I think it's important to level set on where artificial intelligence is today. I know that we are not anywhere near what is called artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And I also know that machine sentience is miles away and singularity is even further than that. The technology purely doesn't exist for any of these things. But I was wondering if you would level set. Could you define where we are in terms of artificial intelligence today, at least in terms of your perception?
Yeah, certainly. I think the name artificial intelligence sometimes can be misleading, and people watching sci-fi movies are further given a high expectation. So AI today is largely doing machine learning, using technologies like deep learning as the central technology. What that set of technologies do is that when you have a single domain with a huge amount of data, and trained to do something that the human gives an objective, like minimize default rate, maximize click-through, recognize the most faces correctly, then it will obediently, as a tool, outperform humans. So on the one hand, it's a very humble capability. It only works in limited single domain. On the other hand, there are so many domains in the world that technology, while limited and narrow in itself, will create a huge amount of value in automating all the routine tasks we can imagine.
So, okay, that's the goodness of today. What needs to actually be accomplished in the interim to get to what, to get to artificial general intelligence, to get to machine sentience? A lot, right?
It's a lot. I think people would have to come up with many more breakthroughs. For example, if we consider the past 62 years of AI, that history, there has been but one breakthrough, deep learning, and that was 9 years ago. And there hasn't been any more equivalently important breakthroughs. In order to get to sentience or singularity or any of the above, we'll need to figure out common sense reasoning, cross-domain creativity, strategy, planning, not to mention sentience, self-awareness, emotions, and all these things, I would say would be at least 10 more breakthroughs.
Yeah.
So if you look at a field that's in 62 years has had one breakthrough in 9 years, we'd be hard-pressed to say the next 10 breakthroughs will come anytime soon at all.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the conception that people have broadly, that there's just a lot of work to do. And the other thing about that is you can't just go, 9 years plus 9 years plus 9 years. You just don't know. It's going to come fast. It's going to come slow. Are they going to come all bunched up, or is it going to be ages between them? So,
it's unpredictable, and I would tend to say unlikely to happen in the next 20 or 30 years.
Right. Oh, okay. 20 or 30 years. All right. So I think people sense this, but I think it's worth laying out anyway. AI, it's not the kind of technology that's going to disrupt a single task like the typewriter did, or even a single type of labor like the calculator did, or going even further, a single industry like the cotton gin did, right? Those each had impacts of kind of smaller degrees. I think economists think of AI as this general purpose technology, and that's a kind of sea change that really will interrupt and accelerate the economies, right? The normal march of economic progress. Could you explain kind of the magnitude of what AI can be to world economy?
Sure. Like economists and experts and management consultants, they've done a lot of work, and they are correct in separating electricity, the steam engine, and computer, internet revolution, and AI as the four technologies that are put into what's called GPT, general purpose technology. That is, as a platform, they will change everything. Like when we had electricity, everything changed. The way you stored food, the way you did work, the way you got to work, the way you can use your evenings, you can enjoy entertainment. Everything changed. So AI is the same way. AI, even in its current form, can be applied to thousands, if not tens of thousands of professions that will basically make very smart decisions about what ads to show, how to minimize loan default rate, maximize return on investment, leading to recognized speech and record everything we ever said, and leading to robotics, automated warehouse, and autonomous vehicles. So the number of applications, when the number of applications become tens of thousands, is effectively a platform that would, in a general purpose way, uplift and change the entire economy and all the industries. PwC has estimated that in the next 11 years, AI will bring about $17 trillion of net incremental GDP to the world. So that is the approximation about the size of the impact, and that is essentially creating another China plus India.
Yeah,
So I think that is the magnitude.
that's a trillion with a TR trillion. That's a big number. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Your book, AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. You've got a hypothesis in there as it relates to artificial intelligence, and that is that the coming divide that it causes will be that U.S. and China, who are currently right now the two countries that are at the forefront of research on AI, will kind of be at the top of the stack, and then there's going to be everybody else. Essentially, a duopoly of haves and the remaining panopoly of have-nots. Can you give a little more color on that?
Yeah, absolutely. To be specific, U.S. continues to lead the world in research, and that is the core strength of the United States. However, given what I said earlier, there has been only one breakthrough 9 years ago, and that breakthrough is open source. So the whole world is competing on their ability to innovate, implement, put AI into practice, into business, make money, and what the countries that will lead will be countries that have that innovation backed up with capital and smart venture capitalists and good entrepreneurs with a lot of funding, and they will also need a sizable market into which AI can be developed and sold. And the market is not only important to size the business opportunity, but also a larger market means more data. So in the era of AI, data is the new oil. So whoever has the most data becomes the new OPEC. And in that sense, China has a lot of advantages because there are more people and people have stronger usages. So China leads in data. Both US and China have strong VCs and entrepreneurs. China's market is huge. US pretty much dominates the developed world and the English-speaking countries. So we would think of that as the market, and is also large, not as large as China, but pretty large. And also that market has a higher per capita income. So both US and China have a lot going for them. Comparatively, other countries either have not great technologies like US does, or not a large number of entrepreneurs and engineers like China does, or not large enough market like either the English-speaking countries or China, or not a VC ecosystem to fund entrepreneurs on an ongoing basis. So when you take these metrics, entrepreneurs, VC ecosystem, data, AI application knowledge, and AI research capability, if you measure these 5 things, other than US and China, there is no other country that you can even put 2 or 3 checks on, not to mention 5 checks. So that would lead to a world where if the pie is 100%, US and China will probably take 90%, leaving only 10% for the rest of the world.
Yeah. And I think I should also just mention that you are, in terms of your thinking on this, you're a moderate, right? You're not all utopian. You're not all dystopian. You're kind of giving it as you see it. And the other thing also is the strengths of U.S. and the strengths of China become a larger factor at different stages of development in AI, right? So when you get closer to, let's call it sentience, the data set of China will be more valuable than the data scientists that reside in the United States.
Yeah, I think one can make reasonable arguments either way. One could hypothesize that the next breakthrough is likely to come from the US, so the advantage will go to the US. One might predict that the homogeneity and the size of data in China will give it advantage. One might say that US is more innovative, or one might say Chinese entrepreneurs work harder. So you can go back and forth. What is difficult is to predict who will be the gold medalist in this.
Yeah.
But what is clear is the gold and silver medals will go to U.S. and China in either order.
So the answers that you've given me thus far, in my mind, these are the groundwork for the thing that I think is as interesting. I mean, I think we could have a fantastic technology discussion, but the socioeconomic discussion, I think, is every bit as interesting. And so I want to ask you a question or two.
Sure.
The last two sentences of chapter 5 in your book are, when the true power of artificial intelligence is brought to bear, the real divide won't be between the United States and China. Instead, the most dangerous fault lines will emerge within each country, and they will possess the power to tear them apart from the inside. Woo!
Yes.
Woo! You want to explain that?
Sure. Because AI is the biggest inequality multiplier. While we've already seen the computer and internet and mobile revolution make the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, whether in U.S. or in China, probably more accentuated in the U.S. One looks at the divisiveness of U.S. today. A lot of it is caused by the haves and have-nots. And the haves have more because a new AI company can be worth $1 billion in 2 years. So that's going to make a bunch of people really rich. On the other hand, the product they build might take away 20 million jobs. And that's going to make those 20 million people have to go through either a retraining process or go on welfare or get laid off and so on. So it's doubly multiplying, right? On the one hand, making the rich richer, on the other hand, making the poor poorer. So that is the tension that will emerge within U.S. and within China. Now, if you think that's bad, other countries are in worse shape because at least U.S. and China have these billion-dollar companies that will contribute revenue and make people wealthy, and around wealthy people there will be a service industry to provide luxury products, and the governments will tax the ultra rich and try to do some redistribution. So at least there's more money to be taxed and go around. So the solutions are hard, but at least the money is there. But imagine a poorer country. They're not going to have those billion-dollar companies to tax to help the people who are just like in U.S. and China. The routine workers will be gradually replaced by AI and automation. So these poorer countries are going to be stuck with just the poor getting poorer, but no rich class being grown. So they're going to be in much worse shape. Furthermore, if they had hoped to follow the China model, which is use lower cost labor to make some money and then get wealthier as a country over time, well, that model's gone because the Chinese type of manufacturing outsourcing job in the next 10 or 15 years will be automated by robots. Similarly, if they wanted to follow the India model, that is using their English-speaking or training an English-speaking population to do IT call center outsourcing, well, those jobs will also be gone in the next 10 or 15 years. So they don't really have a very clear roadmap towards progressive development and evolution into a developed country.
Yeah, they're literally those economic rungs of the ladder, they're gone. And there's no income to distribute kind of via universal basic income. They're going to have none of those resources. All right, so let's talk Turkey about that. What do you, I mean, in your opinion, I think it's called technological unemployment. What are we looking at in the U.S. As AI comes to fruition?
In terms of technical capability for AI and automation to displace human jobs, I think in the next 15 to 20 years, about 40% of the jobs can probably be displaced technically and economically. The actual unemployment may be delayed by some number of years due to regulations, unions, and corporate decisions, and things like that. So we're talking very large numbers, but we're not talking about a giant unemployment number. I think AI will create a lot of jobs, and I also think there will be new jobs that will be either creative or compassionate. For example, jobs that AI cannot do. AI cannot create. AI has no ability to think of a strategy. AI has, in fact, no common sense. AI cannot be a good companion, teacher, elderly care, nanny, nurse, and so on. And many of those jobs are growing categories. And furthermore, there will be jobs that we cannot predict, and there will be hundreds of millions of them, just like the internet. Who would have thought 20 years ago that the internet would have led to so many Uber drivers? So these are job categories created over time. So I'm not a pessimist in saying that there will be no jobs left in 20 years. There will be a lot of jobs. But what we do know is, A, the new jobs, we don't know what they are, so it's a little hard to train. B, the new jobs are likely to be non-routine jobs, because why would AI cause a routine job to be created? Because AI could just do it itself. And C, the displacement is already beginning to happen and will grow. So we can't just wait for that equivalent of the Uber job to come out of AI. So yeah, so I think in the shorter term, we need to look at how to do income redistribution from the ultra rich, whether it's by tax or some other mechanism. Secondly, just redistributing the money is not enough, because with the loss of jobs, the loss of income is secondary. The loss of meaning is primary. So people who have loved their jobs as an electrician or a mechanic or a truck driver or customer service rep now will feel unclear what their life's mission and value is. And also the new jobs created will require some amount of training, whether they want to be a aeronautic repair person or a nanny or elderly care or nurse. These jobs, those safe jobs, will require training. So I think it's incumbent on government and corporations to look at this not as a solving unemployment problem and throwing money to them like universal basic income, but rather finding ways to retrain the people who are displaced so that they can again be gainfully employed and find a new meaning to their lives.
I think that there's going to be kind of a wasteland in there. I think that the coal miners have already said, hey, look, we don't really care to be retrained, and the truck drivers are going to be next. And I think we're in for like a really wild ride when it's the college educated people that, bought into the idea that if they studied hard and worked hard, they'd, have productive working lives. And I don't see those folks wanting to be trained. I know, though, you gave a more level-headed explanation. So I know you've got some thoughts around the psychological struggle associated with the dislocation. How will people begin to define themselves? Will they say, hey, look, you know what? I've always wanted to be the best pinball player in the world. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn to play pinball. Or, you know what? I've always wanted to read the, works in the library by authors with the letter A. That's what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. How will people cope and fight their way through psychologically, in your opinion?
Well, historically, when we look at people who've been unemployed for a longer period of time, like 6 to 12 months or longer, even if they were paid social welfare, we see the rate of depression, suicide, substance abuse, game addiction going up substantially. So while there will be people who find their passion and love, there will be people who find a new training for a new job. But I don't think we can just let go, because maybe a minority of people will find their new selves, but I would say a significant number of people will also be lost and be led to things like substance abuse and addiction and depression. So I think an active approach to take the jobs that cannot be displaced, such as elderly care, nursing, aeronautic repair, and so on, and actively making sure people are being trained into those jobs, especially those who are far from retirement age. I think that will keep people busy. I think it will give them a new sense of purpose. In fact, I would guess that taking care of older people is more satisfying than on an assembly line doing the same motion, 5,000 times a day. Because at the end of the day, you'll see someone thank you and smile and hold your hand. I think people will grow to like that idea. But I also think we need to make sure these jobs are well paid, because today's coal miner or truck driver make 2 to 3 times more money than elderly care. So for that reason alone, the transition isn't going to be workable. So we need to find a way to subsidize through one way or another these new positions, compassionate jobs and empathy jobs, make sure they pay as well. And then we provide the training. Then I think we'll have a smoother transition.
Yeah.
There will always be a few coal miners and truckers who don't want to do, let's say, elderly care. Hopefully they can find something else like aeronautic repair, which AI can't do for a long time. Alternatively, maybe if they have a single income family, maybe their wives will take on the elderly care, and they provided for the family for the first 20 years. Their wife may provide for the next 20. So there are lots of ways for this to work out. At least we have to work hard and find solutions rather than just give money to everybody and hope the problem goes away.
Yeah, I know you did an interview with Christine Amanpour in September, and you were very clear to emphasize that AI, with all its capabilities, would never be capable of creativity or empathy. And in my mind, that the implication to that is that there's always going to be worth and value in being a human being, and I think you agree with that.
Yes, I strongly believe in it. But I also acknowledge that someday AGI may come about. But I think, I think it's very long time from now and it may not happen. So I think the thing we should do as humans is to focus the problems that are 100% going to happen, like AI job displacement, and not spend too much time worrying about the possible displacement of creative and empathetic jobs in the next 20 or 30 years. That's just not very likely. Let's focus on the thing that will happen for sure, rather than the thing that has a very, very low likelihood of happening.
Okay, so let's do that. So your recommendation in the book is reduce, retrain, redistribute. And I think you've actually done a pretty good job, just in without even me asking, of touching on those things in the discussion. When this happens, how much do you figure that softens the blow?
Well, I think it depends on with what determination and resources a country and companies can put on it. And I'm concerned a huge program is unlikely in the short term because unemployment is at historical low. Why would the U.S. government want to put a giant retraining program in place now? So the best I can hope for is that in a piecemeal manner, that we try to persuade the right governments to take small baby steps. For example, while we're not likely to convince them unemployment number will go up, we don't have to. I think we have to convince the dislocation of skill sets. Therefore, training is needed. Therefore, you need to give a training break to people. Therefore, you need to have change the mix at vocational schools, train more nurses and plumbers, train fewer customer reps and auto repair, right? So those are things I think that are very doable at a school or government level. Corporations that should bear some social responsibility in this as well. Amazon, for example, has rolled out a $12,000 a year reimbursement per person if they take on training that into a job that cannot be displaced by AI. For example, aeronautic repair, nurses, and so on. So corporations that are partly responsible for this AI displacement, corporations that have a lot of money and a strong sense of responsibility, not just to shareholders, but to employees, might be the first ones to take action, as Amazon has proven.
Yeah. So I think the thing that sounds great to me. What I think that's the most kind of concerning or depressing part is there seems to be no concerted, coordinated effort on one hand, and also the governments, either they're antiquated or they don't understand or their heads in the sand. There seems to be no will to get in front of this problem. They'll deal with it when the problem shows up. I'm afraid
big movements, big decisions, big movements will not happen until the unemployment numbers go up. But there are small things happening. In the U.S. Senate, there are discussions about giving corporations a tax preferential reduction if they apply some amount to retraining or training of employees. So that's a very small baby step, but at least there are some small things happening. I wish there could be more, but it's, we have to start somewhere.
But look, I know your time constrained, so let me get to the last two questions, and we'll be completed. So the second to last question is a vision question, a question of the future, right? So we have some amazing AI-driven progress out there of the type, like the don't even know what we don't know kind. I think it's likely that we start to drive inputs, food, energy, data access, compute cost down to zero in the long run over time. But at the same time, as we've talked about, we have this massive disruption in employment. We have, government friction. We have bifurcation in wealth and class. What happens, let's put that all into a blender. And where do you come out on what we look like in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now?
Well, I think in 10 to 20 years, we face potentially the biggest challenge for humanity. Not maybe other than war. This is not war, but it's an economic challenge, perhaps the largest. And it's a very paradoxical challenge because we have more money on Earth. We have more resources. Yet all these issues are huge ones to resolve. I think if governments and corporations put their heads together, if countries share best practices, and if we emerge in 20 years having settled the retraining and the people, then in 30 or 40 years, I actually feel our children and grandchildren will look back and say, wow, AI is amazing. It has liberated us from having to do routine jobs. We have more time on our hands. We can spend more time with our loved ones. We can pursue our passion rather than do repetitive jobs. It has also taught us what it means to be human. It is the creativity and the compassion that separates us from AI. So I think there can be all these epiphanies if only we get through the next 20 years.
I hope that we do have that generational fortitude to do it. Okay, I know we could have spent a half hour on any number of topics that we just touched on barely, but I feel compelled to ask you, is there something about this topic, which we didn't bring up in our conversation, which is quintessential to this discussion that we have to at least spend a moment on before I let you go? Is there anything specifically?
I think education is going to be important because we're talking about fighting hard in the next 20 years for the adults to find their new place in society. In order for 30, 40 years to be good, the young people, the children, and also those to be born in the next 10 or 20 years need to have an education that's ready for this new world. And I think that education is not what we have today. It needs to be elevated to a level where we spend less time on rote learning, because rote learning is what machines are good for. We'll never beat machines in anything that's rote. So we need to shift the balance in education to have more training about critical thinking, creativity, encourage curiosity, and also we need to organize class projects and activities so that there is more empathy, compassion, teamwork. So the structure of homeworks and projects also need to shift. So if we start to really do these changes, I think the young children today will be readier for a world where routine jobs are no longer needed, but they have the skill sets and the ability to learn and the creativity to conquer and the compassion to spread in this new world.
Yeah, Dr. Lee, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have a 9-year-old, and I'll tell you, I wake up thinking about it every day.
Right.
It's a big thing, and it's important, and I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, Dr. Lee, let's end here. I want to thank you a lot. I mean, I think it's a fascinating topic. Your insight is absolutely unique, and so I really appreciate you kind of taking the time to lay things out for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
This has been Intangibles. As always, I'd like to thank Denton's Venture Technology Group at dentonsventurebeyond.com for being the sponsor this season and a supportive partner. Operating as a boutique within the world's largest law firm, the Venture Technology Group runs with hard-charging tech entrepreneurs to drive growth through strategic business, finance, and legal advice from Silicon Valley and New York to London, Berlin, Hong Kong, and beyond. Learn more at dentonsventurebeyond.com. And thank you. Keep an eye out for the next episode. I'm your host, Steve BERG.